Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Let's Stay Brief podcast.
Welcome back.
I'm Jenna.
And I'm Ashley.
And this
is a special episode.
This is a special episode. So if you have been, listening, if you listened to our last episode, you know that we have decided to do an episode once a month now. So we're back, but we've taken a little step back. And the last episode that we recorded was actually, so it was, almost a month before your due date?
Yes. Yeah. Just about, because Jenna came over, we recorded an episode, then we went out to dinner to celebrate our birthdays. And I think it was like a few days after my birthday. So it would have been the 29th or something of November.
So it was about a month till your due date. Mm-hmm. And then 2 days
Actually,
after that.
I guess it had to be longer than that, but yeah.
2 days after that, you gave birth.
I had a baby.
Yes. So
which is crazy
because in the episode, we were just talking all about
what's it going to be
what
like?
could happen. And then soon enough,
it happened.
We knew.
Which I'm obviously, also, if you couldn't catch on, today will be my birth story. But I'm excited to talk about it together because you were a part of it in some ways.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yes, which I love.
Which is, it's just very crazy. And I feel like, to be fair, I feel like everyone has been so respectful, to me, which, when we've gone to church or, if people have asked, I honestly, like talking about it. Maybe it's, in some ways, healing for me, but, no one has, directly asked, well, your due date wasn't for 2 or 3 more weeks. What happened?
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I guess that's kind of not a weird thing to say, but so why did you give birth early?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I wanted to know how many people were surprised. When we posted, they were like, wait, what do you mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, you're within that window where anything can happen.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, sometimes they do just go into labor a little early, that is what it is. But if you are catching on, that is not what happened to Ashley.
Not what happened. And so should we just get into it?
Let's just jump right in.
Let's
set the scene.
Okay. Well, actually, let's literally start where we left off, which was us being together.
Yeah.
I think we were together on Wednesday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we are together. We record the podcast. We go out to dinner. Come back home, and Thursday was pretty normal day. I don't remember. I think I went to maybe my acupuncturist or something like that. And then Friday, so Thursday night into Friday morning, I had the worst sleep ever.
Of course.
And
that's just how it works.
Yeah, you're so, I was going to say you're so pregnant, but I'm so pregnant at this point. And honestly, sleep had been a little bit better. And there were just a few one-off days. And so literally this night though, I could not get comfortable. I could not sleep whatsoever. So I think I gave up and was on my phone at 3:30. So it's 3:30 in the morning on Friday. And I then go downstairs at 6 a.m. I'm whatever, let's just get this day started. I'm so annoyed. Cole and I do random things throughout the day, but that night we were all going over to Jen and Tan's house.
Well, wait, you have to add in that you had a doctor's appointment that day.
Yeah, you're going to have to keep reminding me of little details that I'm going to forget. But yeah, that day, at 9 a.m., we had a doctor's appointment. And I don't remember if I said this in my last... This appointment hadn't happened yet, so maybe I didn't say this, but I really hated our whole experience at this office. And
I think you were talking about it a little bit.
Okay. And then Friday came, and so at this office specifically, I scheduled originally with the one doctor that I looked up her reviews, and I was oh, she looks really nice and whatever. And she was also a midwife. I went to my original appointment with her, and then after that they just kind of bounced me around to different providers because she wasn't at that office all the time, and so it was just always hit and miss. And so I saw a few doctors multiple times, but on this Friday I went to a guy that I hadn't been to before, and he was just a world-class a-hole. He just sucked so bad. And
this was your 37-week appointment.
Yes, 37-week appointment. So I mean, these appointments, they're getting, like, I don't actually mean this, but I feel like appointments after the 20-week mark, like after you go to your anatomy scan, up until like 34 weeks are literally so useless and so pointless. And I was like excited, like, okay, now I'm in like the like crunch time. I'm going every 2 weeks, and then now I'm going every week. Like, there'll be more like progress, or like they'll tell me more things. Nope, exactly the same, like nothing else going on. And so kind of a little bit of a backstory, I guess, but like the last appointment I had gone to, I was 35 weeks and 5 days, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll do the group B strep test today, right? And they were like, no, you have to be 36 weeks. And I was like, it's literally 2 days. Like,
but
and also what's so frustrating is like the office like knows those things, but they were the ones that were like, how does this date work? And I'm like, so do you see that I'm 35 weeks and 5 days? Like, so that was super irritating at that appointment. And then also they were like, I was like, oh, can we do a like handheld ultrasound to make sure he's head down? And they were like, oh, you'll do that at the next appointment too. And I was like, okay. So now we're at the 37-week appointment. So like now they're like, according to this doctor, he's like, you did all of the things you were supposed to do at 36 weeks, which was not the case. And so they were like, oh, you need to do the group B strep. And I was like, yeah, I thought I was supposed to do it last time. And they were like, okay, yeah, like we'll get that taken care of for you. Go and do that.
Is that just a peeing test, or did they
Have you never done
a
it?
swab? Well, I don't want to make this about myself, but I had it with Silas, and
I didn't know that.
They detected it in my pee at my first appointment, and they never let me retake it. And they're like,
oh,
you have to get the antibiotics separate.
That's crazy.
I know.
They make you, well, it's really nice because I've seen a lot of girls on TikTok like have different experiences. Like, I think it depends on your office, but for me, they let me like go into the bathroom and swab myself.
Okay, that's nice.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, whatever. Especially this guy, like, he just like,
not a man.
Never a man. Which, like, some people, my whole family had, like, the same OB delivers, like, everyone in my family. And they were like, oh, my gosh, we love him. And I'm like, no, absolutely not.
The vibe. So when I had my endo surgery, it was a man. But he was definitely, like, more feminine. And I appreciated that.
You're like, yes.
But the man who delivered Monty was a man. And he was, like...
Oh, he was
so
the worst.
Rude and the worst. So it depends on the vibe of man.
Yeah. This guy literally just, his beard was all grown out. He was like 65 years old. Like, it was like awful.
Oh, no.
And so he came in and he was like, did your group B strep? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, okay. Anything to say? Also important to add, and this will kind of tip you off to the whole process, but they take your blood pressure at every appointment. My blood pressure came back 120/80, which is what it was the entire time. And she was like, all right, cool. Like, everything looks great. And I was like, awesome. And then the guy came in and I was like, he was like literally about to walk out. Like, he was like, all right, you guys are good. And I was like, okay, are you going to do the ultrasound? Like, to make sure he's head down. Also, he had like measured my stomach and like felt around, and he was like, there's definitely a head down there. And so he was already like, yeah, he's definitely head down. And I was like, okay, well, can you do the ultrasound? And he was like, they didn't do that last time. And I was like, no. And he said, I mean, I guess. And I was like, okay.
Like, what else are you doing? This again to 10 women today?
And he also, to add, he was like 30 minutes late too. Like, we just sat in that room for so long. And so I was like, oh, you're awesome. Like, actually, like, the rest of the day, Cole was so pissed. And like, he doesn't get angry like a lot, and then especially in like those situations, but he was like, no, I'm like actually like so mad at that guy. But like, whatever. I kid you not, he goes back and gets the little handheld ultrasound, puts it up to my stomach, and he said, yep, there's definitely a head. And it was 5 seconds that the little thing was on me, and he took it off, and like that was it. And we were like, okay. All right. So that was like a whole thing. But the main takeaways are just, we went, my blood pressure was completely normal, and that was that. And later that day, we do like a few errands. I think Cole and I go to the chiropractor, and she also like adjusts me and everything. She's like, all right, you look great. See you next week. Cool. And then later that night, yeah, we were going to the Soliches for our little annual Christmas party with us and Peter.
Which was so fun.
It was so fun, and I feel like it completely never got the appreciation that it did, at least as far as like posting wise, because everything flipped.
Yes. Like, well, don't worry. I made a reel, but you probably missed it because you were
dying. Yeah. So we go over to Cole, like most people know, Cole's parents and the Soliches live in the same town. And so we go over to Cole's parents first, and just like see them very briefly. And while we're there, also, like, I'm like at this point, I'm 37 weeks pregnant. I'm very swollen, like,
yes,
everywhere.
Which, let me just also say, like, I just said this when I came today, but I was like, I didn't realize how swollen you were until now. I'm seeing you now. And I'm like, oh,
well, I even remember you coming to the hospital and you were like, already, like, your face is so small.
Yeah, it felt like your eyes were like really puffy.
Yeah.
And like around your cheekbones almost.
And honestly, I was actually shocked, like, that I wasn't like extremely insecure. I was like very surprised that like I would look in the mirror and be like, okay, cool. Like, I don't know, like I wasn't like I don't know. It's not like I had like, oh, I'm having a positive like outlook on this. Like, I would look in the mirror and be like, that is a woman that is 37 weeks pregnant. Like,
yeah, and that's the thing. Is like, there's nothing I can do. So yeah. Why like think about it?
Be weird about it.
Yeah.
But I totally understand like how some women are just like, oh my gosh, I'm so like large. And then like that's the thing though, is like the fluid retention is like weight is different than like the baby weight, I guess.
Yeah.
Like where your whole body puffs up, it's like, oh, okay, awesome. Like,
but you kind of can't tell which is which until afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, you had no way of knowing that it was water weight.
No, I honestly didn't. I was like, okay, I'm just like gaining weight. I think at the last appointment I had gained like 40 or like 45 pounds, and I was like, okay, like whatever.
Pretty normal.
And then okay, so yeah, we're at Cole's parents' house, and my right foot like is at like, my feet are already extremely swollen. My right foot though is at like full capacity. Like, it hurt, and I was like, what is happening? Like, why does it hurt so bad? I don't say anything to anyone until we get over to your house, but that's when like I noticed it for the first time. And I just like, the skin around it was like the tightest. Just imagine like you fill a balloon, like, or like a glove of some like whatever, like
a sausage link,
literally to like the max capacity. And that's what my foot was like. I have a photo, like, I think it was while I was in labor, and I don't even think it does it justice.
No, I should have taken a photo that night, but who had any way of knowing what it would mean?
Yeah. And so, well, I think I finally, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, guys, like, look how swollen I am. Like, my feet are so swollen. And then, like, and everyone, like, especially Peter, I feel like he was like, oh my gosh, like, that's crazy. And then as the night went on, like, I kept drinking water, like, and I was like, okay, this, like, actually, like, hurts still. And I was, like, telling you more about it, and you were like, well, you should check your blood pressure. You speak to what you felt in that, like, moment, because afterwards you were like, I was kind of panicking.
Oh, I was fully panicking, especially because it was so fast, and that it was, like, just one, like...
extremity.
Yes. Which I'm not sure if that... is a sign of preeclampsia. That's just one of them. Mm-hmm. But I was like, Tanner, I think she has preeclampsia, and I'm really nervous, but I don't want to scare her. And I also, like, we're having fun, and, like, I don't want to be like, you should go home if, like, it becomes nothing. So I'm looking all around my house for my blood pressure cuff that I had from Silas, which I'm pretty sure that I actually just took it to the thrift store because
you're like,
I didn't need it anymore.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I was looking everywhere for it because I was like, I just want to see if it's fine, mm-hmm. and then we can go on with the night.
Yeah, just rule it out.
Yes. And then, so, like, you said that, and then, like, a few hours went by, and then you, like, kept kind of saying it, but you were like, yeah.
Oh, we put ice on it at one point, or, like, a frozen peas or something.
And I was just like, maybe put it up or whatever. And, like, throughout the night, I kept, like, going upstairs, looking in the closet for the blood pressure cuff. Then I would, like, be like, okay, it's probably fine. Then I would, like, look somewhere else that I thought it might be. But then, like, by the end of the night, I was like, You should like just
You should go home.
go and take your blood pressure. Like, text me as soon as you get home when you take the blood pressure.
Yeah.
You're like, okay. So
I also had no idea any of these were correlated. Like,
Oh,
I had
really?
no idea. Well, yeah, I didn't know much about preeclampsia whatsoever. And also, I was like, you get that in the beginning. Like, I had no idea it could come on, like, at the very end, in the middle. It can come on postpartum. Also, spoiler alert, if you didn't know that, that's what happened. But, like, I had no idea. And then, like, just being swollen, I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like,
because it is like kind of hard to know, because that is also just a normal pregnancy thing, is to
Yeah.
get super swollen. But that's why I kind of got worried, because it wasn't that like all of you was really swollen, and it wasn't that like it had happened over time. It was like right then and there, 1 foot.
yeah.
And so it was like, that's kind of weird. And so anyways, Ashley then proceeds to drive her car. She drove the whole way back to her house, an hour.
The whole hour. I am like a
said she felt
control.
nothing.
Yeah, I'm a control freak. Like, when it comes to driving, and like, obviously, if you've been around, you know the things that have happened when we've driven back home from Ligonier. And so I was like, oh, like I'll just do it. Like, I'm fine. And also, it's the foot that I press like the gas
Really?
with. But like, we were fine, and we get back home, and I think my parents were already here, and my mom used to be a nurse, and so I trust like her. She balances the medical advice and also like, am I being dramatic, like, very well. And so I like text her that my foot's swollen, and she's like, and also, okay, so to catch us up, it's now 12 probably. Yeah, we left you guys at 11. I haven't I haven't slept since 3 a.m. that morning. So now it's becoming Saturday morning, and it, like, as we were pulling into the driveway, I was like, I'm so exhausted. Like, I've literally almost been up for 24 hours. Like, I cannot wait to go to bed. And so I get in the bath, make an Epsom salt bath, and I'm chilling. And as I'm in the bath, I'm like, Cole, can you get the blood pressure cuff? He's like, yeah. And I start taking it. And also, like, I still don't even know, like, what's high. I asked the nurse so many times, like, what does blood pressure mean? Like, what do the readings mean? And no one could ever give me, like, a really good answer. And so I am like, I think the first reading that came back was, like, 140, like, over 100. And I was like, is that good? Like, I know I've been 120 over 80, but like, what does that mean? And so I start like texting with my mom, and I was like, are you up? And she was like, yeah.
Which is so crazy, because later on she ended up telling me that she just like had a weird feeling to put her ringer on her phone.
She puts her phone on Do Not Disturb every single night.
Yeah, and she's like, I just had a feeling I put the ringer on.
Yeah. And I mean, granted, she was downstairs. If I was really concerned, I could have gone to wake her up. But like, literally, I texted her, and she responded immediately. I was like, oh, I'm so surprised she's awake. But yeah, she was like, no, I was sleeping with the ringer on. And so she eventually, like, long story short, she eventually comes upstairs. I get out of the bath, and it just keeps rising. And we were like, okay. So then we call like the nurse hotline. That also, like, all of the, like, because I don't go to the doctor that often, not because like I don't believe in them, I guess. Like, I'm like, oh, there's no need. Like, I've never had a need to.
Yeah.
Like, I live a pretty healthy existence. Like, oh, I'm fine. I don't know how, like, nurse hotlines work or anything. So I called McGee, and I'm like, yeah, labor and delivery. And they're like, you can't, like, call that floor. And I'm like, okay, well, then who should I talk to?
No, I feel the same way. I would have no idea. I mean, I know about the nurse hotline now, but like, I also would have been like, the doctor.
Yeah. Who can I speak to? I see so many TikToks of girls being like, so then I called my doctor's office, and I'm like, how? Yeah. And also, I hated my doctor's office, so I'm not going to call them.
It's in the middle of the night.
Middle of the night. Yeah. Like, what do you mean? And so basically, yeah, my readings kept going up. I think the last one at home was like 175 over like 120. I'm not going to explain blood pressure. Just go look it up. But my mom finally explained it, like, really well. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, and it wasn't until, like, the last week that Cole and I both were like, oh, like, that makes a lot of sense. And so once that number hit, she was like, you need to call an ambulance. And I was like, I am not calling an ambulance. That's the most dramatic thing I've ever heard. Like, absolutely not. And she was like,
did you in any, like, point of that have, like, a pit in your stomach? Of, like, wait, what if something's actually really wrong?
No, like, I don't know. I definitely am too chill to, I was more chill than I should have been. Like, I should have, if my mom wasn't here, Cole and I would have been like, let's just get some rest and like, and just write it off as something weird. Also, like, so if you don't know, like, go look up like what can happen from like preeclampsia. But if your blood pressure gets too high, you can have a stroke, you can like get a blood clot, like
have a seizure.
Like, very, very, very serious things can happen. And I definitely was not taking it as seriously as I needed to be. But because I was so tired, Cole and I both were just like, let's just go to bed. And my mom was like, no, like, this is like really serious. And we were like, okay. And so we live like 10 minutes away from like UPMC East. And so I was like, I'll bargain with you. We'll go to the hospital, but I'm not like calling an ambulance like that. I was like, I'm not having them pull up with lights with all of our neighbors to see. Like, I was like, I'm not making a scene. Again, it's like 1 a.m. Nobody cares. Yeah. And she was like, okay, like, I just would really want like someone to be monitoring you like on the drive and stuff. And I was like, we can drive. It's fine. Cole drives to East. That's when I stopped driving.
And I
drove myself
alone.
But yeah, he drives and we get there. This is going to be the longest episode ever. I'll try to speed it up. But we get to the hospital, a miracle, like nobody was there. And so they take us back right away.
No, not a miracle. They saw you're 37 weeks pregnant and you said you had high blood pressure and they swooped you in.
They said, okay, why don't you come back here, sweetie? And they sat me down and like read my blood pressure. And I'm not going to continue to say numbers. It was still incredibly high. And they, like, again, I still don't know what the numbers mean. I just knew I was in a high range. But a nurse like walked past, like the nurse took it and she said, oh, okay, all right. And then another nurse walked past, and as she walked past, her eyes like got all wide and she was like, oh. And I was like, okay, awesome. And the entire time still, I am like, you're going to give me medicine to get this blood pressure down, but this baby is not going anywhere. Like, this is not happening.
This
like,
is not birth.
No. And like, I felt prepared, but then also not at the same time. Like, our hospital bag was already, it wasn't in the car, but it was packed. Like, my dad was at home and he ended up grabbing it. But so we had the car seat in the car. Like, we were prepared, but not mentally. I was like, no, that's not going to happen. And so
I think also your due date getting moved forward, it made it even more jarring of like, well, I wasn't even thinking that I was going to have this baby till January. Now I'm supposed to be having him late December. Now it's early December.
Yeah.
And like, this was not what I thought it was.
The fact that everything throughout the pregnancy had gone so perfectly, and at the last minute, essentially, like, this all happened, I was just like, there were some feelings of like my body failed in some ways, but also not. Like, I definitely don't feel that now, but in the moment I was like, why is this happening? Like,
yes, which also, if you didn't listen to our last episode, Ashley was like trying to plan for like a natural birth without interventions, and I don't know, we'll have to go back and listen if we discussed like if you had to be induced or something.
Oh yeah.
But
because I think I said one thing I was always nervous about was going to 42 weeks in the hospital being like, okay, like, let's talk about induction. Yeah. Like, I really didn't want that. But I never, it was like literally never even on my mind that it would be like a medical emergency. So
anyways, you're in the ER, they are seeing your blood pressure, and they're like, you have to get magnesium right now.
I went to the bathroom. They were like, can you go pee for us, like, in a cup? And I was like, yeah, sure. I go to the bathroom. I come back, and there's a gown, like, sitting on the bed. And they're like, if you could change real quick. This is also minor, but I, like, threw clothes on. And so I didn't put underwear on because I was like, I'm going to bed. Like, yeah. And they're like, you can leave your underwear on. And I said, I don't have any on. And they were like, well, I mean, it is what it is. And I was like, all right. But then again, like, telling me to put the gown on, I was like, oh my gosh, like, stop. Are they admitting me? Like, everyone's being so dramatic. And I literally get the gown on and I sit down and people immediately start like touching me. Like, okay, let's put the heart monitor on. Let's get the blood pressure cuff on. The blood pressure is going to be taken every 10 minutes. And let's start a drip of this. Da, 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 da. And yeah, okay, also for context, if you know that Jenna and I love What We Said, that was like a podcast that inspired us to start this podcast. And so if you are a fan of that podcast and you've heard JC's birth story, our birth stories are eerily similar. Very similar. And so from her birth story, I remembered her talking about magnesium and how it affected her.
She had preeclampsia.
The same thing, yeah. Like, I don't know. She was a little further along than me, I think, but she puffed up in the same way and then, like, went to the hospital and they're like, let's get you on magnesium. And so they said to me, like, okay, we're going to start a drip of magnesium. It's going to feel like this, yada, yada, yada. And I go, wait, like, no, I don't want that. And they were like, okay, like, do you want the doctor to come by and, like, talk to you about it? And I was like, yeah. Because of JC's birth story, I knew that you can't eat or drink for the time that you're on it. It can just make you, it was the first basically intervention that, like, I was accepting, and I just knew that it messed with her a lot, and she said she had a lot of, like, I guess regrets about it, or, like, was like, this affected me.
She wishes it didn't have to happen.
Yeah. And so the doctor came by and he was like, I need to be, like, very honest and frank with you. Like, you will, like, that you need to take this because, like, it reduces your risk of having a seizure. And I was like, and I said, I just want to be able to eat and drink. And he said, you're getting transferred to McGee, like, by ambulance. You're not going to be able to, like, eat and drink for a while.
And also, like, you could die, basically, like,
yeah,
soon.
He was like, please, like, I mean, like, essentially, I don't know what would have happened if I still was like, no, but I was like, okay, like, I just needed him to explain it to me more because, again, I'm, like, still, like, I don't know the severity of everything. And every, like, nurse that came in, I was like, this isn't it, right? Like, I'm not, like, giving birth. And they were always like, no, like, they'll probably just get you on some meds and, like, you're fine. So obviously my mom and Cole came with me, and Cole was sitting in the room with me, and my mom was still in the waiting room. The nurse went and got my mom, and she told me after the fact that in the hallway, she was like, just so you know, they're transferring her to McGee, and they'll start inducing her. And my mom was like, really? Like, you can't just give her meds and send her home? She was like, no. I mean, she's 37 weeks. Like, she's to term, essentially. Like, we can start it.
Yeah.
And my mom was
also,
like, oh, okay.
When you have preeclampsia, like, the only way to cure it is to have the baby.
Yeah.
Because it's happening because of the pregnancy.
Yeah.
So
I think it has something to do with the placenta, and so it's like they need to, like, get the placenta out as, like, soon as possible.
Oh, I didn't know it was about the placenta.
I think so. I think that's what the doctor said. Everything is, like, kind of a blur, but so while we're still at East, no one, like, says, like, you're having this baby, but a nurse was like, the same thing happened to me at 37 weeks and I gave birth to a beautiful baby. And I was like, okay, freak, like, that's not gonna happen to me. And long story short, nothing else really happens at that ER, but, like, everyone, like, through birth, like, was incredible. Like, everyone at East was wonderful. I loved the ambulance, like, EMTs. They were really great. And, like, yeah, like, Cole came down with me and he sat in the front with the guy, and then, like, the girl sat in the back with me, and, like, how, like, we made, like, great conversation, and, like, she kept monitoring my blood pressure and everything. And have you been in an ambulance before?
Not, like, for my own, like, emergency.
Oh, okay.
I went in an ambulance at a football game in the fall because don't want to bring this up, but there's no changing tables at the park or the field, so I had to change Silas in the ambulance.
You're like, I'm gonna be needing this.
That's actually what sparked the conversation.
Okay,
we'll talk about that another time.
That's a story for another day.
Yes.
But yeah, it was
cozy.
It was great, and she had the heat blasting because it was also, like, I can't remember if it was snowing, but it was cold.
Yeah.
And
you're in your gown.
Also, yeah, I'm in my gown, and I have, like, a few blankets, but the magnesium, I will send you, actually, I think I sent you this photo, I can't remember, but, like, the magnesium makes you really, really hot. Like, it brought on, like, a ton of heat, and so they brought ice packs and, like, put them all over me. And there's a picture of Cole, like, taking 2 ice packs and smushing my cheeks together because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so hot. But, like, when we got to McGee, it was, like, 20 degrees outside, and I was like, I feel great.
I love it. Keep me out here.
I was like, can we have the baby out here? So we get to McGee, and again, I'm like, all right, this is so dramatic. I'm getting pushed through on this, like, ambulance, like, or like this cart, whatever. And I think it kind of started to set in, like I got off the elevator and it said labor and delivery ICU. And I was like, oh, ICU is not a great like term. And so I was like, okay. And then I get wheeled into this like pretty like big room and in like a private room, and there's like a baby, like the baby warmer and everything. And I was like, all right.
Isn't that such a weird feeling?
Yeah.
Seeing the cart, you're like, he's going to be in there.
What do you mean?
Soon.
Yeah. And so at that point, I kind of had started, like, no one had, again, said anything. I even asked the EMT, and it's just so funny that they're all trained, like, it's, like, kind of duh, but they're all trained exactly the same, where...
To, like, keep you calm and, like...
Yeah, and I was like, they're not going to induce me. She was like, no, like, you're fine.
That's
I was like,
so
okay.
crazy to me, because even I was like, she's going to get induced, because going a little bit back, when she got home, I texted her, what's going on with the blood pressure? And she said, no, it's a whole thing. My mom wants me to call the nurse line. And as soon as you said it was high, I was like, she will be induced tonight. Like, if she calls the nurse line, she will be induced.
They'll be like, get to the hospital.
Yes. And it's just crazy that all of those, like, medical people were like, no. And I'm like, yeah, duh. That's
of course,
what they
you idiot.
do.
Yeah. And so I had, like I said, all of the staff that, like, I dealt with, like, through delivery, like, postpartum, we kept saying, like, care kind of went downhill a little bit, but everyone that, like, in the crisis, like, situation was, like, incredible. And so this one doctor came in and explained everything to me, literally like a second grader, which is what I needed. And she was like, you have preeclampsia with severe features, and that's what we, like, deem when you get into that 170, 180 range. And so the only way to fix it is to have the baby. So as of now, we are going to induce you. And I was like, all right. And okay. So then at this point it is like 3 a.m. and like Saturday morning at 3 a.m. So now it's been 24 hours since I've slept at all. And I am just like, all right. And I think in that moment I was like, so, cause like, if you don't know, like when you get induced, like, now it's like we're starting all of these interventions basically to force your body to go into labor. And
which is exactly what you didn't want.
Yes. And so I was like, but also like if you've been around a while, you've heard us talk about like, oh, like we don't really go to the doctor. Like I don't think we've ever said we don't believe in doctors. Like I definitely believe in doctors. And I was prepared to surrender like where I needed to, and yes. I was very aware that like this is really bad. That doctor was the perfect doctor. I needed to come in and explain things like very like childish, like or in like childish terms, because I needed to grasp like the severity of it.
Yeah.
And so I had to like stay on the magnesium, and she was like, she was like, we'll start you on Pitocin right away. And I was just like, okay. Which technically, like, I guess, like, obviously, like, that I wanted what kind of birth did I want? I kept thinking of, like, without medicine, what is it called? Unmedicated.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, Pitocin still is, like, it's, like, fake oxytocin, and so that's what gets your body, like, through labor. And, so I'm, like, still, like, okay, we're still technically in the unmedicated, like, area. And so she was like, we're going to try, she checked me, which also I was like, that was the first time I had been checked because I hadn't gotten that far in any of my appointments yet. And I was like, okay, like that was uncomfortable. And she was like, yeah, your cervix is completely closed. And I was like, I was really hoping that maybe that you'd come back and be like, a 2. Like,
she's like 10.
Yeah, you're like, oh my gosh, no way, you're ready to push. That would have been insane.
That would be crazy. It would be nice if the preeclampsia also like naturally brought on labor, but yeah, it doesn't.
Oh, that would have been like, really nice.
Okay, now we have to force you to go into labor, and your body is like pretty much like, no, I'm still trying to grow this baby.
Yeah. So she tries to put a Foley balloon in, and again, it's so early in the morning, like on Saturday morning at this point, and as I continue to tell the story, just know, pain-wise, the balloon was by far the worst pain I've ever experienced, and will ever.
Okay, wait. Here's the question. Did they ever offer you the epidural pre any of this?
No, they didn't, which I don't know if they talked to my mom or to Cole. Like, a lot of people never came up and asked me questions. So I knew going into labor that Katie, I definitely said this in the last episode, Katie, my mom, and Cole would be there. But
And they
we
had
didn't.
your birth plans and everything.
They didn't, because we didn't print it out yet. And so I'm like texting Katie, like, hey, I'm at the hospital. I have high blood pressure. I don't really know what's going to happen yet. She's sleeping. She never responds, rightfully so. And she doesn't see everything until the morning. And she's like, oh, like, she was like, you should have called me. And I was like, what? So you could come and have an uncomfortable, like, sleep on this couch? Like, nothing was happening. But we asked her to go print off the birth plan. So once she got there, she handed it to them, which, again, never saw, didn't know. But by Saturday morning they had it. But yeah, they never offered me anything, which I was, and again, I was like, well, I mean, we'll try it. Like, we'll see, like, how far, like, we can get and everything. So they attempt to put the Foley balloon in, and she was like, you're so closed, like, I can't, like, get it in. And I was like, okay. And so she was like, we're gonna try this, like, pill, which I think I saw it in a TikTok the other day. I can't remember what it's called, but she was like, we're gonna try this pill first to see if that can, like, open you just a little bit, and then we can try again. And I was like, awesome, I can't wait to do that again. Like, yeah. And so, I kid you not, after they attempted to literally stab me from the inside, she puts in the tiniest pill, just boop, into my cervix. And I was like, you mean you could have done that first?
Yeah, seriously. Come on.
Which I guess, like, I understand, like, saving time or, like, skipping a step. Anyways, that was very easy. So I don't know when they come back and check me, but the next time they do, I was at 1.5 centimeters. And she was like, okay, like, that kind of got us where we needed to be. And then they do the balloon again, and I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be the worst thing ever. I think Katie might have been there that point. So it's like Saturday morning or like afternoon. Maybe like Saturday afternoon, like at noon. And they do the balloon again. And this time she could do it. She was like, okay, like, I got it in. And I was like, okay, like, I'm glad that's done.
As bad as the first time? Okay.
And so that's why I was just, like, literally praying that they could be successful and that it wasn't for nothing.
Yeah.
Which I had heard, like, some people say, like, again, I've heard some people say that, like, it wasn't that bad, but it was people that were, like, already dilated. And I mean, I was a 1, so it was like there was something there, but I've heard that it'll help take you from, like, a 3 to a 5. And so it's like, oh, it's not that bad. And it was pretty bad. And so that is in, and they're like, all right, we're going to let that do its thing. And I'm on Pitocin still at the same time. So it's like, kind of like my body is wanting to, like, get contractions going and everything. Haven't felt a contraction up to this point.
Okay.
And so they every, like,
why am I, like, on the edge of my seat?
You know what happens.
I'm like, and then what?
And then what happened? Every few hours, this was also pretty bad. They would come in and, like, tug on the balloon just to see if it would fall out. So that's how they know that I'm pretty sure the balloon will get you to, like, anywhere between a 3 and a 5.
It was a 4, I thought you said, when it came out.
Yeah, it was somewhere in that range. And when they would tug, oh my gosh, I don't know what it was, the immediate nausea. And I literally, like, she was like, okay, like, it's still intact, and I'm writhing, like, in pain, and I'm like laying on my side, like, trying to just, like, breathe through it. I was like, that is awful. And they were like, okay, they're like, do you want some Zofran? I was like, anything. Yep, yeah. Anything. And they were like, because I was, like, so nauseous. And I was like, I'm going to vomit.
It's also, like, the knowledge of what it is. That's like, please.
Yeah. Also, like, I feel bad that maybe I didn't put a trigger warning, but I mean, you hear that it's a birth story. So if you are pregnant and maybe you don't want to hear this, or you just want to gain the knowledge of it, like, I'm just obviously being very honest in my whole experience. Yeah. But you can get through it.
Yeah.
And you'll forget about it afterwards. But once the balloon, like, finally, like, fell out, which it was a crazy feeling. Like, the next tug, I think I had felt it shift a little bit. And so I was like, I feel like the next time she comes around, like, it's going to fall out, which is what happened. And I was like, oh, okay, thank God. And then they came around and checked me. They're like, yep, you're at a 4. And I was like, okay, cool. And then a couple more hours of just being on Pitocin, kind of chilling. So also, I didn't have a bathroom. I had this real janky, I've never seen anything like it, a toilet that pulled out from underneath a sink, and it flushed and everything from there. And it was right next to like my bedside, but I still had to like walk to it. And on magnesium, they're like, you have to be in bed, like you can't be walking around. But like I felt fine because like obviously like magnesium just relaxes your body as a whole, and so I'm pretty sure like they're pumping you with that to tell your body like I'm okay, like, and to like kind of chill out so you don't get thrown into that seizure state. If that's incorrect and you know better than I do, then inform me, but I'm pretty sure that's why. And so they're like, oh, we don't trust you to be like walking around and everything, and I'm like, but because they're pumping me with so many fluids, I'm peeing every 10 minutes. Like,
And
I
since
have to
you
pee
didn't
so
have
bad.
an epidural, you didn't have a cath.
Yeah.
So you had to
I had to get up.
naturally pee.
And I had to disconnect my blood pressure cuff. I had to take my IVs with me. I had to take the bands off that were monitoring contractions and his heart rate. It was always, like, I literally dreaded it. Like, and because I was just like, okay, I have to pee. Can somebody help me? Like,
Yeah.
it was so annoying.
And so now at this point, you have not slept for what, like probably 36 hours?
Actually, I will say, after they put the balloon in, I slept for maybe like 3 hours.
Oh, okay. That's a nice little nap.
Yeah, it was like a nice little, like, once we had gotten settled and everything, there's nothing to do but wait. And so, yeah, contractions like weren't like intense or anything. So I just laid down and we all slept. Cole, like, people might be like, roll their eyes at this, but like, I genuinely felt so bad for Cole because there's nothing that he's going through, so his body is like sleep. There was nothing keeping him like awake. And so through all of labor, like outside of being up till 3 a.m. on Friday morning, he's experiencing the same sleep that I am. And I just like felt so bad for him because like he would literally be like holding my hand and like leaning on the bed, like snoring. Like he's just so tired. And I just, like, there were times that I was like, oh, sleep. And then there's other times I'm like, no, like, I'm sorry. I really need you. Like, I'm scared. Like, I want you to be like near me. And obviously he always like rallied. But later on, when I got an epidural, he was like, thank God we can all sleep.
Oh, man.
So I think they gave me a few more hours on just Pitocin. And I am pretty sure when the balloon came out, I was at a 3. And then on the few hours of Pitocin, they came back and checked me. They're like, you're at a 5. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay.
You're like, we're doing this, baby.
Progressing. Like,
and also, let me just say, obviously I wasn't there, but from like the updates that Ashley and Cole were texting me, you were like not in pain from the contractions, which is so crazy because like for me, that was the hardest part. Was the contractions. And you were literally at a 5, fully laboring, and you're just like, yeah, like it just is kind of crampy.
No, yeah, we like I was like, yeah, it's nothing more than like period cramps. Like vibes were up like on Saturday.
You're like, I'm gonna do this naturally. Like I'm doing it.
Yeah, honestly, like through most of labor, I like once I knew I was getting induced, like I would say vibes were like pretty up, and time does not exist in a hospital. Like it went by so fast. And so like, yeah, Katie got there like Saturday afternoon, and then Cole was actually eating because I couldn't eat at that point. Like, to be fair, I was on a liquid diet, so I just kept ordering broth like 24/7. I was like, give me more broth, give me more broth. I also, did you have the Italian ice while you were there?
Of course.
That was also, when I got that, I was like, oh, this is such a treat.
Yes, and they had the good ice.
Yeah. And so Cole and my parents were actually getting dinner like in the cafeteria when they came to check me. So it was just Katie that was there. And she was like, Katie, like, saved me like during labor. There are so many people like that after the fact and like through our hospital stay, like that were like just so amazing and like went above and beyond for us. But Katie, like, without her and Cole, my mom was also like there and was great and was a good bridge between like what the nurses were saying and like what like I needed to hear. But Oh my gosh, she will be at all of my births.
Oh, that's so nice.
So like when they checked me and I was out of 5, she was like, "You're doing amazing. Like I cannot believe it. Like you're out of 5." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." Like I said, I was like, "Okay, like this is happening and like I'm not feeling anything. Like could I actually do this?"
Mm-hmm.
And so they still just on Pitocin. I think at this point, I'm trying to remember. We fully relied on Pitocin through the end of labor.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, like, actually, that's what it was. Out of 5, she broke my water.
Right.
And I was like, okay. Like, and I was like, things are going to get more intense, right? And she was like, yeah, that's the point. And I was like, okay. And so, yeah, that was like some point in the evening on Saturday. And, then after that, like things definitely started to pick up. They allowed me to sit on the birth ball and I was like happy with that. And we just started like implementing all of the things like I wanted after that. And again, time didn't exist. So I don't know how, like, I don't know at what time things happened or like whatever. But it was some point, like since I've dragged on for so long, there's no point in like harping on stuff within this window. But like they checked me like right before things got really intense and they were like, okay, maybe you're out of 6, but it's like 5 or 6. And I was like, okay, like that's kind of a little discouraging. I haven't progressed a little bit more, but like I'm okay. And so the 6 is definitely when things like kicked up, got more intense, and I'm trying to move and like get comfortable and like tackle different like positions and everything for contractions. And I was like in a great headspace and was doing like really, really well. And then at one point a nurse comes in and she's like, hey, like you like need to stop moving around because we keep losing like his heartbeat through like your monitor. Like you need to sit still. And Katie was like, well, how long do you need her to sit still? And they were like, if we can get 15 minutes of monitoring him, then you can have 30 minutes off. And we were like, okay, like that sounds good. So like I would sit on the bed for like 15 minutes and like they would get what they need to. And then like when I moved around, like I kid you not, like I don't know where he was or like what was happening. If I sneezed, if I like anything, like they would lose his heart rate and it would like the machines would be like beep, like, and I wasn't afraid, like I wasn't like scared that
You're
like
just like, it's off again.
yeah. And they would come running in, like not running in, but like they'd come like, all right, like we need to like figure it out.
Also, if you have not like labored before, like laying still is probably the most uncomfortable thing you can possibly imagine when you're in labor. Like,
Yeah.
it's just horrible.
I think I was just like sitting upright and would just like legs crossed, like kind of just like breathing through them. Like Cole put like I had this like microwavable heat pack. Like Cole had like the heat pack on my back, and Katie would like rub like essential oils like under my nose, like, and I was just like trying to power and I at that point my contractions I think were 5 minutes apart or something like that. So it was like very like manageable still. But when we hit that 15-minute mark and then like I would move around, the nurse came back and she was like, well, we need to monitor you. And Katie, this is where Katie stepped up and she was like, okay, well, you just said, or another nurse just said that we could do this like situation. And she was like, well, no, we need her to like sit still. And she was like, oh, okay, so that nurse was lying? Or why are you saying something different than her? And they were definitely getting frustrated. And so it was kind of at that point that I was like, if I need to sit still, I can't do this like much longer without an epidural. And they ended up coming, they talked to the doctor and they figured out a way to monitor him internally. They put this like literally like this little pin, like I can't even describe it, like the thing like was smaller than a pen and they just like attached it, like it sounds worse than it is. He's completely fine, but they just like stuck it to like the top of his head and that was a way to monitor him.
Cup almost.
Yeah, but like so small.
I want to look it up.
Okay. And that was a way to monitor him internally. And so like after that, I think I was still moving around and then they still were like, because of the magnesium, like we need you to sit down, like we need you to stop moving. And I was like, okay, if that's the case, like I just can't like do this anymore. And Katie, and again, the sleep, that was like the biggest point. So at this point I'd slept like 3 hours in like 48 hours, something like that. And I was like, I'm exhausted. There's no way like I'm getting all the way to the end. And I like felt slightly defeated to like throw in the towel like on the epidural, but also like was very much dealing with like reason. And like I would talk to Katie and Cole, like I think when I brought it up, they both were like, you have a long road ahead of you and you need some sleep. And I was like, you're right. Like, and I can't do the sit still like at all.
Yeah, you can't just lay there for hours and hours and hours in labor.
And
like flat.
Yeah.
You physically cannot. Like,
and also the bathroom situation, like I was still getting so many fluids and still had to pee 24/7. And so I was like, I can't do it anymore. And that was when Cole was like, yeah, you should get it, because he's like, I'm so tired. Yes. But he, like, everyone was very aware, like, you have not slept. You will not have energy.
48 hours at this point, I'm pretty sure.
You will not have energy to push if we keep, like, on this road.
And you needed that energy.
I needed that energy. That's for sure. And so, honestly, like, every, like, time I needed something, I was, like, very shocked at how quickly it happened. And so, Katie was like, are you sure you want me to go get the nurse? And I was like, yeah. Also, like, everyone like knew I was going like unmedicated up till that point, and that was my goal. And I will say, I will toot my horn, everyone was like, what birth classes did you do, like what are your secrets? And I was like, oh, like I didn't do any birth classes. And they were like, for real? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, you're handling all of this like really, really well. And I was like,
especially
wow,
with Pitocin, like
that
is known to be like, you can't do it.
Yeah.
And the fact that you did it for so long, like, I was on the edge of my seat just being like, is she still going? And Cole's like, yeah, she's fine. And I was like, really?
Really?
Which is just so crazy. Like, obviously, you know, I 100% understand that you needed sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just so crazy that, like, I really do think you could have done it if you didn't have the situation that you did.
Yeah. And yeah, if you didn't know, Pitocin contractions, like, since it's fake oxytocin, that they're known to hurt much more
because they're like stronger almost.
Yeah. And so every time that they came in and like we're gonna up it, I was like, I'm so scared. But yeah, so at a 6 basically is where I like bowed out. And so then the nurse was like, is she sure? Like, I just want to double confirm with her. And I was like, yeah, I'm definitely sure. And they were like, okay. And I've also heard horror stories of people being like, I requested the epidural with the anesthesiologist and there were like 5 people ahead of me or whatever. And so at that point, I'm just like, okay, it probably won't be for like another hour. Just like still stay in the zone and like just keep breathing through it and everything. My hero walked in 5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh my gosh. And he was like, I heard someone needed an epidural. And I was like, are you serious? Like, I literally was like, are you for real? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, that was so fast. And he was like, yeah, quiet night. And I was like, oh my God.
Thank God.
Thank you so much.
Okay, obviously say this quickly, but do you think that getting an epidural is as horrific as people act like it will be?
Definitely not horrific. It didn't, like I said, like genuinely through the whole thing, what hurt the most was the balloon. But like I definitely like felt the pinch and everything, and I was scared. I was scared of having a contraction through it, and so I kept telling him like, he was also really great. He was like, you determine how this goes. And so I think at one point he was like, okay, are you ready? And I was like, no, a contraction starting. Like, and he was like, okay, all right, just let me know. And so the minute it passed, I was like, go.
Do it now, do it now, do it now.
Yeah. I was just really afraid of like having to like bear down like during that. And so, after everything else I did, and that's what everyone says. They're like, after everything else you've experienced, it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
I do think it only worked fully on my left side because as I was like laying down, I kept getting like really strong period cramps like on my right side. And I kept like breathing through it a little bit, and Katie was like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I feel it. She's like, you shouldn't feel anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And so like I kept like upping it. I was like, give me another and another. And then like once like it got to like pushing and everything, like I didn't really feel anything.
That's good.
Yeah. I just like, you just feel the pressure. So long story short, after I get the epidural, we all sleep. I think I got it at like, again, maybe like 2 or 3 a.m. So like that was really like the 48-hour mark of like no sleep. And this was honestly, I was so happy when they checked me the next morning. This was very what's the word I'm looking for? It made me feel really good in my decision, because they checked me and they were like, okay, you're kind of still at a 6, maybe a 6.5. And I was like, if I had labored through the night, and they came and checked me at like 9 a.m. So it was like a lot of hours had passed. It was like, if I had labored through the night and I was still at a 6, I would have ended it all.
Literally.
I would have been so pissed. And so like everybody in the room was like, oh, like I think was like afraid of me being disappointed. And I was like, I don't care. I genuinely don't care, because I slept and I feel rested. I don't feel anything. Like, and I have the catheter at this point, so I'm peeing without even knowing it. I don't have any reason to get up. I was like, I am okay. And everyone was like, okay, good. And then time is irrelevant, but the next time they came back to check me only a few hours later, they were like, whoa, you're at a 9.5. And I was like, for real? And they were like, yeah, like, you're gonna have a baby. Like, I mean, I knew at that point that it would have been crazy if he wasn't born on that Sunday. Day. But they were like, yeah, like, all right, give it a few more hours. And like, yeah, we're gonna have a baby today. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay, cool. Like,
yeah.
And so then around, yeah, that's about right. Around noon, the doctor came back in and she was like, all right, 10 centimeters, like fully effaced. Like, actually, like, was he fully effaced? Yeah, fully effaced, but was at like station 1, or I don't know what the stations mean.
He was still kind of like back in the birth canal.
Yeah. And she was like, all right, well, this was also really discouraging. I don't know if this happened to you, but they were like, all right, you're ready to push. We're going to get this process started. And she like left. Like the doctor left, and like the nurse just stayed in there the entire time and just like watched me.
And they're like, we'll call the doctor when it's really time.
Literally.
And you're like, but I thought you just said it was really time.
Yeah, I was like, it's time. I was like, where are you going? And I kept saying to Katie too, I was like, oh, I have to poop. Like I'm like holding him in at this point, like is what I was saying. No, like, I mean, he was getting down there, but like I had a lot of hours ahead of me.
You think when you watch movies or whatever of birth that it's like the pushing is the fast part and the laboring is the long part, which can be true.
Yeah,
obviously.
I mean, all of it was like start to finish. Once they started inducing me to when he was born was about what's like 48 plus 12, 60 hours. Because it was like 3 a.m. on. Wait, no, whatever. Who cares? It was a long time. People. And so long story short, I pushed for 3.5 hours, which if I had had no sleep would have been quite literally impossible. I kept saying that to Katie. I was like, that would have been so hard. And she's like, no, like you actually wouldn't have been able to do it. Like your body, I feel like physically would not be able to do it. And I feel really lucky out of the whole experience, like that like C-section was never brought up. I really thought like I wasn't going to get a chance to like try like for a vaginal delivery. I thought that they were just going to be like, all right, you have preeclampsia. It's kind of an emergency situation. Like we're just going to like do a C-section. Like, and even after like 3 hours of pushing, they were like the 4-hour mark is when we kind of start talking about like.
They said that to you?
Yes, but she said, I think she was insinuating like using forceps, using the vacuum before. Like she never said C-section. She said other options. And I was like, okay. So
my heart is like beating fast because I'm like, I feel like I'm like there.
You're there.
I just know the feeling of them being like, okay, we're gonna have to look at this, and it's just like, oh.
And it
hurts
with every push. So like they coach you on how to push and everything, and with every push, that little pin that's monitoring him is moving, and so it's like Katie and Cole are seeing it move, and they're like, you're making progress, like, and they're like, you're doing so good. Like they probably recited the same things over and over to me so many different times, but like, he's right there, you're doing so good. But
when you're in it, you every time need to hear that.
Yes.
You need to hear someone say, he's right there. It's so close.
It's so close. You're about to meet him. It's so close. But also, I'm like, the doctor's not in here. Like, I know that. But, like, I'm making progress. Again, time doesn't exist. And they're like, I don't know if I asked or if someone said like, all right, you've been at it for 2 hours. And I said, excuse me? That was 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is crazy that I would say that because it like was exhausting. It wasn't painful, but it definitely, they were like, push harder. And I was like, how?
I don't know how.
Like, I literally how. And so that I was just exhausted, and multiple times I was just like, I was pretty silent most of it, but there were a few times I just like let out like, F this, man. Like, F this. Like, this, I just want this to be over. I will say the funniest part I'm so excited to say this because it was like the comedic relief I needed. Right before he was born, honestly, Katie had obviously been saying so many things in my ear the whole time of like, he's so close, like, oh, you're doing so good. And as it was getting closer, this was extremely encouraging too. She was like, oh my gosh, like the baby team is coming in here, like they're getting his bed ready, like, oh my gosh, like the doctor's getting her gloves on, like it's happening, like you're so close.
I have chills.
And she was like, it's actually happening. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. Like I like also didn't like open my eyes like a ton. Like I just kind of like would lay there like meditating, and every time I felt a contraction, I'd like get up and start pushing. But like this part,
what are you supposed to look at when you're pushing if you do have your eyes open? It's kind of awkward. You're like, hey guys.
Hey, yeah. No, I would just like literally like lay there. Oh, sorry, I got further away from the microphone. I would just lay there like, and Katie and Cole were on each side of me and just like saying things to me, and I was like, okay, all right. Like, but Katie leans over at one point and she says, "This is the last moment you're going to be alive." And I said, what? And like she just happened to like take a pause, and what she meant to say was, this is the last moment you'll be alive without your baby. But it was just, this is the last moment you'll be alive. And I don't know if her like brain like had a moment or what it was, but I just said, what? You're telling me I've made it this far and now I'm going to die.
She's like, it's all over.
You've hid multiple things from me, but now you're just gonna be like, I'm gonna be honest with you. This is it.
This is it. I can just tell.
I can tell. Anyways, so a couple more pushes, and like after 3.5 hours, and they were like, he's right there. Like, and also I told Jenna, like, I reached in and touched him a few times because I was like, that's what I needed, the encouragement of like, okay, he actually is there.
Yeah.
And so I'll just get to it. I pushed him out, like the doctor assisted like getting his shoulder out and everything, and then he just really came, and they like placed him on my chest, and I kept saying, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? And Cole is like obviously so emotional, like everybody's crying, and as he's on my chest, he's like not really like responding like right away, and he was like a little not a little, he was like very like dark, and like the doctor also, before I finished pushing, was like, oh, who's cutting the cord? And I was like, well, we're gonna do delayed cord clamping. And she was like, yeah, I know, but like when the time comes. And I was like, oh, Cole. And she was like, okay. And he was probably on my chest for like 15 seconds, and they were like, okay, Dad, go ahead and cut the cord. And I was like, I knew also at that point, like, oh, okay, like,
so he hadn't cried yet.
He hadn't cried yet. And my mom said he was pretty, again, like, I was looking at him, but also, like, my eyes were closed. I was crying, like, and my mom said he was pretty wrapped up in the cord. So I don't know. She said it was, like, on his arm, like, so I don't know. We have, like, him coming out, basically, on video, kind of, but you can't really see, like, where the cord is and everything. So yeah, they have him cut it right away, and as Cole cuts it, like, he lets out a cry, and so I'm like, okay, like, I feel like better and everything, and they're like, we just want to take him over to the warmer and like have him pink up a little bit more, and I was like, okay, and so he laid over there for like an hour, and I will say, I'm gonna try not to cry. That, like, the 2 hours like postpartum were honestly like the hardest, like, of anything. Like, I felt so raw, like, and he, like, I didn't get the like delayed cord clamping, I didn't get the golden hour.
Let it out.
I'm okay. But like looking back on stuff, I was like, oh, that like really hurt.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got really bad, like, post labor shakes. And so I just felt like I was laying there, like, I didn't feel like I was dying, but I just, like, looking back on some stuff, I was like, oh, I was like, because of the magnesium too, I was like, there was not life, like, in my eyes, like, at all. Like, and it just makes me really sad. Through, like, all of labor and everything, I was very adaptable and was, like, okay with, like, how plans changed and everything. And I was like, whatever, we need to, like, bring him into the world safely. But then, like, once being here, I just felt so, like, this feels, like, weird to say, like, sad to say, but, like, very disconnected from him because of everything that was necessary for me to be under. Like, I'm not, like, bitter with the hospital or any of the doctors. Like, I know all of those things were necessary, but it just really sucked.
Especially after going through all of that, you have this light at the end of the tunnel of, like, I'm going to be holding him and, like, we're going to be looking into each other's eyes. And then to, like, not have that.
Yeah.
You're just like, okay, like.
What was all of this for?
What's going on?
Yeah. And like, my birth team of, like, my mom and, like, Katie and Cole were, like, really good about, like, taking care of me. Like, Cole kept going back and forth between me and Cohen. And I was like, and even so, like, they laid him on my chest, like, after, like, that hour, and I was just shaking because, and I also spiked a fever after birth, and so, like, I got antibiotics for it later, but I'm hot, and I'm, like, shaking, so I'm, like, but I'm also cold, and, like, it was just, because my body temp, I think, was so hot that I just, like, he laid on me for a little bit, and I said to Cole, it was, like, just take him, so, like, I just felt very, again, like, disconnected from him, but, like, obviously, like, I was like, I love him, like, and obviously that's all resolved itself, like, at this point, but those, like, first, like, few days, I was just like, what the F happened? Because I had to be on magnesium after labor too, and, like, through my hospital stay, and it just makes you very sleepy and everything too, and so, like, I just feel like I was, like, a fraction of, like, the human, like, that I am, and it just makes me sad. Obviously, like, I know, like, I don't fear that, like, him and I's, like, connection is, like, hindered because of that, like, or anything, but I look back on that, and I just feel really sad for myself, and then everything else that came afterwards, like, that was, like, our first few days were so hard that, like, when people ask, like, how we're doing now, I'm just like, oh, I'm, like, great, like, I got 2 hours of sleep last night, but who cares, like, I'm at my house, like, and so, long story short, after that, we got transferred to a different room, I got cleaned up and everything, and, everything was, like, looking good, and we were finally, like, getting rest, and then, the day, so he was born on Sunday, we were supposed to leave on Tuesday, because I forget, like, that even is, like, a little bit longer than, like, a normal, like, regular pregnancy. I think they were just trying to monitor both of us a little bit longer.
Also, you didn't say his measurements.
Oh, he was 6 pounds, 2 ounces, and 20 inches, which we were both, like, shocked. I mean, granted, he was born at 37 weeks, but, Cole and I both were pretty big babies, and so we're like, he's gonna be huge. Mm-hmm. And, like, when they were about to weigh him, they're like, any guesses? And I was like, 7 pounds, and they were like 6'2", and I was like, that is the tiniest thing that's ever existed.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, that we were supposed to go home on Tuesday. Everything's looking good. The pediatrician comes in and she's like,
when I was there.
That is true. Jenna,
the tides turned both times when I was there.
When Jenna was present.
In the worst way.
Maybe you're the problem.
Probably, honestly.
But no, I mean, like, I talked about earlier, like, the people that, like, helped us, like, so much in, like, the first few days, and Jenna was one of them. I'm not gonna cry. Like, she came and, like, decorated our house, and brought us Kelvin, and just, like, came and sat and met him for a little bit. And while she was there, the pediatrician came in, and she was like, he's looking, like, slightly jaundice.
And she was not nice either.
No.
Like, I
it was just very frank.
She was like, yep, he's jaundice, so we're gonna check him now.
Yeah. And yeah, that's what I meant, like, when, like, care slowly started to decline, where it was like everyone was so attentive and so kind, and, like, in the beginning, and then, like, in the middle of the night, like, the first night, the nurse just took him while we were sleeping, and she was like, okay, he's bathed now. And I was like, what? Like, and again, because of the magnesium, I was in another dimension. Like, I didn't feel high.
Did I even say, like, maybe I did say to take him. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I didn't feel high, like, at all, but, like, I just felt like I wasn't there. And so she, like, would bring him back, and I was like, oh, like, okay. So anyways, the pediatrician was just like, yeah, he's looking a little bit jaundiced, so I'm gonna have her check that out, and we'll, like, let you know. And I was like, okay. Long story short, on, like, the jaundice thing, he, like, the levels went up, they went down. He had to we had stayed 2 extra nights, so Tuesday night and Wednesday night. And
so basically, they went to the hospital on Friday night, and they did not come home until Thursday.
Yeah.
Of the
Thursday,
next week.
yeah, evening, which, again, I was just like, how is this even possible, like, time-wise? It didn't feel that long, but then, like, when we're just, like, not getting great sleep and, like, wanting to go home, like, so bad, like, I was like, this has been the longest experience of my life.
Also, during that stay of him staying because of jaundice, you had another blood pressure spike.
Yeah.
And had to
I was also on the phone. I was on the phone with Jenna when that happened. So yeah, on Wednesday night, we were like, okay, like, this will hopefully so when babies are jaundiced, and it can be common, like, when they're early too, they just put them under these blue lights, and it helps, like, get their levels up. I'm not going to go into explaining it, but that was also really hard because they're like, supplement with formula or, like, produce more milk, and, like, I just feel like no one was giving me a chance to, like, but to prove that, like, I could do it. But then also anytime I pumped, like, whoever was in there was like, oh, great job, like, that's a great amount of milk. But then depending on the doctor that came in, they were like, yeah, you should really think about formula.
And then they also, when he was in there with the lights, like, you couldn't be snuggling him. You were only allowed to take him out to feed him and change him. So then that's adding more, like, disconnect of you being like, yeah, okay, I just had you, and I'm literally not allowed to just, like, hold you. Like, so then when you're feeding him is, like, the only time you're getting with him.
And even, like, the first night, when he was under the lights, they were like, yeah, just take him out to feed him and change him. And I was like, okay. And when he was out, it was, like, for 45 minutes because I was like, I just want to hold you, like, and snuggle you extra and everything. And then, like, the next day when they took his levels, it had rose and it needed to go down. And so they were like, you need to get serious about it. And I was like, okay. And so I wanted to go home so bad that I was like, well, we'll be serious. And so, like, I would pump, and then, like, we'd give him, like, syringes of milk, like, through, like, the glass or, like, the little incubator thing he was in. And so I was like, okay, like, I can take it seriously. And so when you have, like, preeclampsia too, they make you do, like, this, like, at-home uploading of, like, your blood pressure to help continue to monitor you. And so I had done my first, like, upload, and I was on, like, I still am, like, on medicine for it and everything too. And so it's, like, just supposed to help, like, keep your blood pressure low. And I uploaded everything, and again, I was like, oh, that blood pressure reading is, like, not that bad, and you also have to upload your pulse. And I hadn't, like, done any activity or anything, and my pulse was, like, 119, and they were like, also, I think a common, like, one is, like, your resting pulse being, like, 80, and so they were like, hey, like, were you, like, kind of, like, running around, like, doing things? And I was like,
I just had a baby. No, I was not running around.
Yeah. I was like, no. And they're like, okay, that's, like, kind of concerning. And I was like, okay. Since this podcast has already been so long, I'll try to wrap it up. Essentially, like, more time passes, I feel like my heart is, like, beating out of my chest, and it's just so crazy the things that switch in your brain, like, the minute you become a mom, because I was just like, I need to stay alive. Like, yes. For him, I was like, it's not about me just, like, being lackadaisical or chill anymore. Like, I need to, like, stay alive. And so I had been discharged at that point, and we call his nurse in, essentially, and I'm like, what do I do? And she was like, well, you could go down to the ER, like, the ER at McGee, and we'll take him to, like, the nursery, and we'll monitor him and everything while you're down there. Oh, this is, like, the hardest part.
The worst part.
Part.
Especially because you were so close to going home. Yeah. You're literally hours away.
Oh my gosh, this is the worst. Okay. I go down to the ER, get checked in, they're monitoring me, and then I explain the situation to a few different people. Everyone kind of leaves and they don't really say anything. It's again like 3 a.m. And so it's like, why do all these things keep happening? I have a photo of Cole too we can post. He's like sleeping in a chair because that's like genuinely where he's like, I can't like keep my eyes open. Nothing was happening. And they take me for a CT scan just to make sure that there's no like blood clot like in my heart or anything like that, or in my lungs, like, which I like appreciated ruling out, but it's still like another scary thing. And I come back and I was like doing okay, but like I hated being away from him. And there was a baby like in the ER that started crying, and I just like lost it. Like I was like, oh my gosh, like this is the worst thing I've ever experienced.
And your hormones too.
Oh my gosh.
It's just so.
It's like
you're also bleeding. Like it's just the
perfect storm. People like, I've heard of people talk about like the way your hormones drop and everything, and I just like said to Cole, I was like, I'm not gonna hurt myself, like I'm not in like that dark of a place, but like just now I'm in a very dark place mentally. Like I was like, I'm not, like, I don't want you to admit me anywhere, but just know I need you now more than ever. I'm in a very, very dark place. And he was like, okay. And I was like, I just want him to get better. I want to get better. And I'm going to try to get through this next part. But the doctor essentially comes back and she sees me sobbing. And I explained to her through my tears, like, just what I had experienced and everything. And she was like, the CT came back normal. And I was like, I'm not gonna die. And she's like, no, you're not gonna die. And I was like, okay. And she was like, we'll get you on another med just to really make sure that your blood pressure stays down. But she was like, I'm not concerned about this, like, and was just so encouraging and was like, let's get you back up to your baby. And I was like, okay. And so I get situated and I walk out, and she was like, I'm walking like that direction, like, let me walk with you guys. And like, just, oh, she was just so amazing. She was like what I needed, like in the middle of like these like difficult doctors and like the pediatrician being rude and some nurses just being very frank, and she was just like what I needed. And she walked us all the way back to our room. And she was like, I'll make sure, like, they bring you your baby and, like, back in here and everything. And I was like, okay. And so that was, like, definitely the lowest. But he, like, came back into the room and, like, we started our routine again. And it was just good to, like, be back with him. And then the next morning, like, he tested good for everything. And, like, we were able to go home. Yeah. And so, like, once we got home, honestly, since being home, I was gonna say everything's been smooth sailing, and it definitely has compared to what it was. Like, obviously it's been hard, we're not sleeping, obviously, but like I like don't care, like, compared to like what that was. And there have been so many, like, the nurse in the ER the second time was like, oh my gosh, the same thing happened to me at 32 weeks, and my baby had to stay in the NICU for 6 weeks, so I know how you feel. And I was like, also like started like sobbing because I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm away from my baby for an hour when he's upstairs and you had to go home without yours. Like, I was just like, I'm sorry, I'm crying. And she was like, being away from your baby in general is so hard. And I was like, okay. And she was like, but we're gonna get you healthy. And if you can make out what I'm saying, like, kudos to you. But I was just like, it gave me like such a fresh perspective on like moms that like have babies in the NICU at all. And they were like, oh, he's in the NICU. And I was like, no, he's not even in the NICU. Like, he's just chilling in the nursery. Under the blue lights. He's under the blue lights. And they're like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, they're gonna, like, the jaundice will clear. Like, it'll be fine. And so it made me feel dramatic in some ways that there are so many women that have babies in the NICU. And I feel like I've always heard those stories. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so sad. Like, I'll make them a meal or whatever, but like, I could have never comprehended, and I still can't, like, because I haven't experienced it, like, but just like, you're so vulnerable in those first few days, and like, that would probably like just the worst pain and like I've ever felt in my life. And I've said to Cole, like, even throughout pregnancy, like, anytime, like, anything, like, felt scary, I was just like, you have exposed yourself to, like, an immense more love, but at the same time, you've exposed yourself to get hurt in 500,000 different ways, and it's so painful.
Truly.
And
it's literally that thing of, like, you don't get it until you get it.
Yeah.
And then you just do. And like you said, like, like, your brain then just thinks back to everyone that you know, like, that had a NICU baby or that had this or whatever, and you're like, I had no idea how you were feeling.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry.
Cole had, like, once we found out on Wednesday, like, early Wednesday morning, like, his levels had gone up, so they were like, we'll definitely do another day under the lights. So we knew, like, early on that we were gonna be staying. Cole, like, came home to shower, because he hadn't, like, had an opportunity to shower in a while, and get some more things from home to kind of make us feel, like, fresh. And he came home, and Jenna had decorated our room, and it said, like, welcome home, Cohen. And he was like, I just stood in our room and I cried because you guys should be here.
No.
It's just the worst.
It really is.
But yeah, it wasn't, like, it hurt, but again, like, I just know that other people have it, like, much scarier situations, and some people might be like, why are you crying over jaundice? And I was never concerned about his safety. Like, I knew that, like, they were doing everything that they needed to, but yeah, being like, there's no reason to keep talking about it because I'll just keep crying. But once he could come out and, like, we were discharged, it really had, like, he's been perfect. Like, every pediatrician appointment we've gone to, they're like, he's the definition of perfect, and, like, he's gaining weight and breastfeeding's going really, really, really well. And so I feel lucky in so many other, like, areas, but, like, those first few days, that first week, man, it was something. So that's why I'm like, oh, labor was, like, whatever, because his first, like, 48 hours of life were, like, the hardest time I've ever had.
Yeah, it's crazy how every birth experience, like, there's a different element for each person that, like, makes it so hard or so, like, life-altering or whatever. And, like, for you, it was afterwards.
Yeah.
Which I feel is not as common.
Yeah.
Especially with someone who's induced with preeclampsia.
Yeah. Some people are just like, oh, then my baby was here and I forgot everything. And, like, you really do. But I don't forget those first, like, few days. And, like, I mean, clearly when I think about it or talk about it, like, it's still, I honestly haven't, everyone that I would talk to about it was there. And, like, they know already. But, so, like, actually, like, talking about it, I'm definitely still very raw. I kept saying to my mom and Cole, I'm like, I need to go to therapy over this. Like, and it, like, once I got home, my mental state became so much better. But I was like, how long is this going to last for? Like, do we have to stay here for a week? Like, what else is going to happen and everything? And so, anyways, that's that story.
And that's our birth story.
And that's my birth story. And I'm so sorry I talked for so long.
That's okay. The people want to hear it.
Yeah.
How old is Cohen now?
He is 3 weeks. Oh, yeah. So he was born on December 8th. And like I said, 6 pounds, 2 ounces. But yeah, we're recording this on New Year's Eve. And so he was 3 weeks yesterday.
Wow.
I know.
And he's thriving now.
He is thriving. He's perfect. I love him so much. And, like, yeah, sleep, like, comes and goes. Some nights are just, like, really, really good. And then other nights like last night, it was like once every hour, it felt like. And so, but it really does. I just, like, love him so much that, like, your perspective is, like, kind of like what you posted the other day of, like, I'm just so happy I have a reason to get up in the middle of the night. Like, I'm so happy he's healthy, like, and that he does wake up and wants to be fed, and, like, that, again, like, that he's healthy. And so I'm just kind of like, all right, like, we're doing it.
Yeah. Well, you're doing a great job.
Thanks.
And it is so normal to be traumatized by your birth experience.
And that's what I was, like, I am, yeah, like, traumatized in different ways, but also wanted to make it clear, like, that the hospital, as far as, like, making sure he came into the world safely, I was very happy with, like, my experience and did not feel pressured in, like, different ways and everything. Like, that felt like a cakewalk compared to everything else.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, crazy. I don't know if like it just makes me wonder like what future pregnancies will look like.
Yeah, I know. Well, I've heard many people say that a lot of times it's common to get preeclampsia with the firstborn being a son.
Interesting.
So, next pregnancy,
Might be out of the woods.
you're going to have just a spontaneous labor.
And
It's
it'll
going to be
be
2 hours long.
I'll push for 10 minutes.
And you're going to just be in a primal position.
Yes.
He's just going to slip out. And
Well, that's also like once it's done the first time, I'm just like, oh, the second time, like it will happen faster, is what
Yeah.
I've heard. Like, but it's almost like it will be faster.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And hopefully you won't have to be induced. It'll just be good. I mean, they even say if you get induced with your second, it's faster because your body already knows what to do.
Yeah.
So
but yeah.
and
that's
Ashley's
that.
pregnant.
And I'm pregnant. It's so funny that a few people have asked like, when's the second one? And I feel like a lot of people are always like, let me do the first, but I'm already like, give me 10. Like,
Oh yeah, it's like a
oh my
freaking
gosh.
drug.
He is just like, oh, he's so scrunchy. And like, I already feel like, I'm like, he's growing up, but I'm like, I need that fresh newborn again and again and again.
I know. It's a drug.
Yeah. But yeah, all right. Well, Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year. Well, okay, we don't know when this is gonna come out.
Oh yeah, that is true.
Hope you guys are having
A good 2025.
Yes. And I think next month we're gonna do a Q&A. Did
Sure.
we say that? Like
Yeah.
just like an Ask Us.
Yeah, we should.
So
We make the rules.
we'll see you guys then.
All right. Love you. Bye.
Bye.